Alright, so you wonder what's in the box? Well, I've been waiting on this for weeks, and if you watched the last video, I bet you know what it is. So let's get into it and check out what we have in the mail today. Everyone loves new toys for the car. Now it's fragile, so we gotta be careful. Be careful. What do you think? You know what it is yet? Probably did giveaway right here. Wow. Wow, look at that. This is, I think, almost too nice for the car. Wow, man. That's right. We got our gauges back from being all rebuilt, restored, updated. Wow. Check those out. Wow, that looks amazing. So the tachometer didn't work, the clock didn't work. You recalibrated all the gauges and this updated the speedo and the tachometer and put a quartz clock in it. Nice. Wow. Now we just have to figure out how to get it all back together. There she is, man. Take a look. Beautiful. 49,835 miles. Cool. Man, that's awesome. Here you can see a good close-up of the gauges and how they look. You know, I talked to Shannon over at Redline. Really great guy, easy to deal with. And the clock, you know, it didn't even work, but it's actually been converted to quartz now, so it's all modern internals. Same thing with the tachometer. It didn't work, but it's all been upgraded. You can use it with your MSD ignition, which is going to be great for me. I was actually running the MSD tach adapter, but I won't have to use that now. So that's going to be great. One less electrical system I have to have in the car. So it's all been upgraded. Speedometer is upgraded and recalibrated, as well as all the temperature, oil, and the alternator gauge or the amp gauge is actually being converted to volts. And what he ends up doing is straight down is actually 12 volts, right? And he actually sent me this little diagram, but every tick mark is going to be 1 volt. So on the far left side, that's your 8 volts, then 9, 10, 11, and 12 is straight down, 13, 14, 15, 16, your far right is 16. So, because I originally talked to him about maybe, you know, actually putting some numerical values or how these read, and he went through all of it for me, so now I feel a lot more comfortable about knowing what these gauges actually read. And the same thing with the oil and the water temperature. So the oil gauge, oil pressure gauge is at 80 psi gauge is what he told me. So it starts out at the very bottom, the big hash mark by the L, that is 0. And then it goes to 20, 40, 60, and the very top one is 80. And again, it's an 80 psi gauge. So really, with knowing the actual details, this is going to be all right. I'm going to feel pretty comfortable using this, especially now that they've been updated and recalibrated. Now the water temperature, he said this is a 250 gauge. The very bottom is 100 at that big hash mark. And then basically right horizontal is going to be like 190. And then halfway up between, you know, but I should say 3/4 of the way up, the gauge is like 210. Then the very top, that hash mark is 250. So it's going to be a 250 gauge. So now I can have a really good idea of exactly what the motor is going to be doing as far as oil pressure and water temperature. And now we're going to have volts instead of the stock, you know, alternator / amp gauge. So this is going to be a great upgrade. And let's take a look at the back. Now it's interesting, they sent instructions for the original gauge. You don't need any wiring for the volt gauge now, it's all comes from here. So what they suggest is taking the original amp wires, basically connect them together and shrink wrap them so you can tuck them safe behind your dash somewhere so they won't make any contact, and keep them out of harm's way, and just stash them up there is what you want to do. Now before I put the gauge cluster back in, I'm going to replace the factory light bulbs with LEDs. That's right, I went with super bright LEDs from .com, and I'm going to replace them with these BA9s. And I'm going to go with the clear ones because the element, I should say the little plastic shield and the light bar is already colored, and I'm just going to go with clear ones. So I've seen pictures and videos online of this, and they worked out really well, really brighten it up substantially, because these things are so poorly lit at night. So we're going to put these in now and see how they fit. Okay, so it's a little hard to get the camera in here, at least while I'm actually working, so I'm having to hold it. But here's the light bar wiring harness. And the Rally cluster has 4 bulbs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's the first LED I already put in. And I'm going to go ahead and put the other ones in, and then we'll snap in the light bar and get all those going. Alright, we have all the LEDs in place and lined up, and I'm just going to go through now, pop them into their sockets, and then we can lift the light bar and put it on top of the dash while we work on the gauges. Alright, so here are the 2 wires for the original amp gauge. It's the red one, and it's like a black one. So they come out of the same harness. They're right next to each other. They're heavy wires. And just in case you forgot when you took them off, some people do, but this is what they are. And to go with the Redline volt gauge, since it has its own wire or power source for the voltmeter, they recommend just hooking these together if you still have these under your dash. So I'm going to run a bolt through these. I straightened out the eyelet so I can get them nice and tight and flush with each other. So I'm going to put a little bolt through them, then shrink wrap them, and then tape them all up with electrical tape and find a safe place for them up under the dash so they won't ever rub or come in contact with anything. Alright, so I had a little bolt. It was actually a little too long, so I cut it off with my cutoff wheel and ran it through, and I tied the 2 sides of the amp meter gauge wires together, bolted those up really tight, and I actually have a giant piece of heat shrink. I'm going to slide that over and see how well that all closes up. It might not close up real great because it's so large, but we're going to give that a try and see how that works. Well, the heat shrink did what I was kind of afraid of. It closed up well, it fit, but the end is still open. So I'm going to trim this off with some scissors and then go around it with the old electrical tape. Make sure it's all closed up good, but that's a good start anyway. Good first base layer, I guess. So I think I realized why the turn signal indicators weren't working in the gauge cluster, because I only had 1 light bulb. One was in the parking brake. It wasn't in any of these, so I had to run up to the store and pick up 4 new bulbs. So these are the GE 1895s. So you have 4 sockets. So you have your turn signals, you have a low oil pressure, and then a brake. So I'm gonna put all new bulbs in before I put the cluster in, so it's easier to do right now while all that mess is out. I just finished installing my jumper wire. Now this is gonna look a little different than stock because this is all set up for the volt gauge, and so the wiring's a little bit different, obviously. So anyway, I just wanted to take a video of that and show that to you guys. Have the cable on for the clock, and I have all my new bulbs put in for these 4 ports, and now I'm going to go ahead and put this in and install it. On the back of the cluster you have a lot of codes for your actual wires. So example, if you can just look on this one says tan, this says LGN, which is going to be light green, and this is red, and this one's dark blue. So those are your 4 clear bulbs that I showed you, the 1895s that go in the back. Now if you look at your manual, or this is the colored sheet that's available on ebodies.org, but it's the same one as your manual. So but it shows you right here, right? Here's your far left bulb, that's your dark blue, and then here's your tan one, Again, it lines up with what we just saw, and then green and red. So there is actually some good color coding on the back of the gauge cluster. And if we take another step further, let's look at, the top of your fuel gauge is DBL, again, dark blue. This gauge here is V for violet, and GY is going to be gray. And again, come back over to your manual, or in this case, in my printout, your violet, black and red, and then gray. So everything's really color coded. So you don't have to be too afraid. Just really take your time and check your manual and making sure you have everything coded properly. And then on another tip, I definitely like to use some dielectric grease on your connections. Make sure they're all good and clean, and put that on so you have a good connection. All right, well, wow, that was pretty intense. That was a lot of work to get the cluster back in, but we have it in now, and check it out. It's not bolted in, it's not secured, but everything's connected and everything's in place. So I'm going to get it all secured, but there's just not a lot of room back there. I mean, getting it out was definitely the easy part, but the wiring harnesses are short, right? It's definitely not designed to put in or install it while it's, like laying on your steering column like I did, because the wires just aren't long enough. So it's really meant to be installed in the dash, and then, the wires all put on from the back side. I can only assume, that's how they did it from the factory. But I was able to do it. I tried to get all the connections I could while it was on, my column, but there was still, a couple of the light bulbs like this. The farthest one wouldn't connect while it was down here. A couple of the connectors for the, gauges I had to connect once the gauge cluster was in the dash, but yeah, it's all right. It's all done. I'm gonna get everything secured now and get everything back in the dash and get it all bolted in. All right, so I have the gauge cluster bolted in and the trim bezel all bolted in. I think we're in the home stretch. Now we're gonna look at putting the headlight switch panel and all that, get that connected and bolted in. And man, we're rolling along. One tip when you're putting all this back together, if you took this bolt out, this one's actually, the screw I should say, it's actually a little bit longer than the rest of them. So my car was actually missing it, so I had to go find one, and then I didn't have a black one, so I had to paint it satin black real quick. So anyway, one tip there. So getting it all bolted back in, still have to put the light bar back in, but yeah, she's going along pretty good now. Once you got the gauge cluster back in, that was a nightmare. So our last step is to put the adjusting knobs back on the clock and the odometer cables. Now what you need to put these on is a real small screwdriver. Do we have a little screwdriver? Yep. Does it fit inside there? Yep. All right, it does. Now originally it didn't. Originally this had too large of a shaft in diameter. We had to grind it down a little bit because you need a long straight blade screwdriver. And these are held on place by these little locking nuts. Again, it's a straight blade. On the back side, they are female threaded, and they actually will attach to the cable that comes through the gauge cluster. And these just slide down in, and once you have it fitted, you thread it on to the actual cable ends, and they're secured in place. So we're going to go do that now, and we'll be all set. So here's the halogen in the dome light. This is the 1142 bulb. Now what I found out as a surprise, that they actually spray painted the inside of the dome light red. Pure 70s, man. It's hilarious. So you guys got to see this when it's on. It's awesome. Alright guys, so I wanted to show you what these LEDs look like in the evening. So here we are, it's dusk here, and I want to get inside the car and show you what the LEDs look like inside the dome light and the gauge cluster. And now we're going to turn on. There you go. All right. So as you can see, I think that's going to be pretty good. You have your dimmer you can always use as well. But right now she's turned up as high as she can. Let's see. I don't think the dimmer works real well on this car. Yeah, it worked great. It's a little funky, but yeah, So I don't think that's going to be too distracting or too bright. If anything, I really like it. I think it's a great upgrade to do the LEDs on the gauge cluster. I think it looks killer. And plus, I love the factory color of the blue-green light. You can buy LEDs. The color of your choice, though. You can go that route too and swap out, take out those little lenses and always put clear ones or remove them completely. But I like that factory light. It's just cool. The only thing is, if you have any additional gauges, it might be really hard to try to get those to match anything, right? So, but I don't plan to add any gauges right now. I mean, maybe in the future I'll add a fuel pressure gauge or AFR gauge, but we'll see. Right now, I'm gonna keep it just like that. So that's what she looks like, man. I like it. I really dig the LEDs in the car. Total red light district. This is awesome, man. All right, it's kind of dark. I'm not picking much light up through the GoPro, unfortunately. Yeah, it's not coming out right. I have a really good picture of it with my iPhone. I'll link that to it so you can get better an idea of what it actually looks like. But that's freaking cool. That's cool. So the new gauges are all installed, everything's hooked up, and now we're gonna start the car up and show you how these things work. Alright, sounding good, tank is working. We got oil pressure. Voltmeters right about, is just over 12 or so. I've only got a few gallons of gas in the car, and obviously temperature's still cold, and you can see the clock. She's ticking away. You have to set that obviously. But yeah, nice. Couldn't be any happier, man. This is so cool. All the gauges are working now. Oh yeah, let's check out turn signals. Oh yeah, she's working. Yep, they're working. Cool, cool. Able to set the fuel pressure, no problem. I was able to actually dial it down to well under 6 if I wanted to. But I have it set at 6.5 right now. Thermostat housing is all good and dry. So is the transmission lead is fixed. And she sounds great. So it's been all cloudy and rainy today, but next video we're going for a drive. Well, she's done. We got the gauges in the car, and best of all, they all work, man. And she sounds great. And we'll follow up from the last video. Fuel pressure is set, transmission doesn't leak, thermostat housing is sealed up good and dry. So Man, thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys liked the video. If you did, hit the like button and please subscribe if you haven't. And see you guys next time.